Hello everyone, I'm Carthu and welcome back to the dojo. Today we are going to discuss the mystery behind Goku's new technique, potentially. It could be nothing, but we're going to go through all the options that I've seen thrown around and I've thought of myself, as well as describe what's actually happening on screen and why it's sort of making everybody go nuts. So this is, of course, when Goku, in his Super Saiyan God form, starts to get lava-y hands. But right before that point, there's actually just a ki ball inside of those two hands. As he spreads his hands apart, there starts to be this liquidy looking lava-type ki all over his hands, and the ki ball expands into a ring with a massive hole in the center. This then leads to a shot of Broly being enveloped by flame that looks very similar to the aura of Super Saiyan God, as well as Broly being shocked by this aura and potentially this power of whatever is actually happening to him. So overall, this technique does seem to be effective against Broly at the very least, but at the very most it won't do too much since we know they have to go Super Saiyan Blue and get torn up and fight a bunch towards the end, as we see in this trailer. Of course, it wouldn't be much of a movie if Super Saiyan God was our solution when Super Saiyan Blue and even Ultra Instinct are in the back of our minds. So, moving on from that, let's discuss all of the options for what this could be. And starting with probably the simplest, is it's a variation of the Kamehameha. The Kamehameha has been a staple of the series, and Goku has used it in unique ways before, whether that be the feet Kamehameha, the instant transmission Kamehameha, or even the skating Kamehameha. Goku has found unique ways to use Master Roshi's technique throughout the entirety of the series, ever since he first learned it, which was very early on, even surprising Master Roshi, who said it would take about 50 years to master. So, could Goku make a God variation of the technique? You see his hand positions are quite different actually, and the ball turns into a ring and envelops the opponent with the fiery aura of God. This could potentially just be a new form of the Kamehameha that utilizes God Ki and the flames of God Ki in an effective way against an opponent who may not be used to the pressure of God Ki perhaps, or something along those lines. Just know it could be a variation of the Kamehameha, but we can move on to the next choice, which is it's just weird ki manipulation. During the Tournament of Power, ki was used in a multitude of ways that were different from the usual generic blasts. Ki runes and ki mines are a couple of examples that I can think of without really thinking too hard. Perhaps Goku has learned how to manipulate Super Saiyan God's fiery aura and ki into fire/lava itself. This ki-amplified flame or ki-amplified heat could be enough to catch Broly off guard and potentially even damage him a little bit, causing some of the armor damage that we saw later in the movie. This may be when it happens. Another potential option for this technique is something a little bit different than what we usually have. This technique could potentially be a sensory type of technique. Now, the only reason I actually bring this up is because of the dialogue in the Broly movie that leads me to believe that Broly is, well, a good person. And I'm not very surprised by that revelation. They seem to have been living in peace, Broly and Paragus, when it comes to just minding their own business. They sort of didn't bother anyone. They just lived, tried to survive after the cruel predicament they've been put into. And then Frieza comes along and says, hey, I'm gonna save you, now fight for me. And also wrap up your son with this control collar. I really don't want him to get on my nerves. And that's exactly what Paragus does. Now, it does seem like Paragus will have some sort of tragic story, but that's neither here nor there for this. It does just seem that Broly is a good person. They're trying to really emphasize this in the trailer. So if that scene of Goku saying, I could tell you're not a bad person, is any indication, potentially this attack is not actually an attack. It is a way for Goku to sense a person's intentions, a person's morality even, and maybe even something beyond that. So, if this technique could actually sense a person, understand their inner workings, at least to some degree, that would be a very, very interesting thing in terms of Dragon Ball. It's not something that happens in Dragon Ball, these sort of more interesting techniques that have less application unless you use them more wisely. there could be better applications in the future for this technique, especially if someone eventually finally should learn Devilman's technique. If that was ever learned by him, by Goku, he could actually sense out if the person he was trying to use Devilman's technique on would actually work. That'd be actually an interesting combination. But there's more nuance than that could be done. This is just speculation, of course, guys. But with that said, I think I've spent enough time on this. Just think potential sensory thing. But the next option is probably one of the more likely, and that's just artistic flair. As we know in this movie, the director Nagamine is letting everybody who is animating on this movie do whatever the hell they want. He's letting artists be individual, and maybe to some degree that's bad, but to some it's good, and we get these individual traits in terms of effects, designs, lighting, things like that. Overall aesthetic could change very rapidly between animators, which could be a negative, but it also means we get something like unique effect shapes, interesting design beams, and overall a unique feel, and honestly an identifiable feel comparatively to the Yamamuro era of movies. So this being said, do we have an animator that would animate something like this? Well, we do. During episode 130, animator Atsushi Nikaido animated one of Jiren's ki attacks. This ki attack had a similar liquidy effect on it, or to it in its shape, that this does on Super Saiyan God. Thanks to Anime AJ, we know that Nikaido is on the Super movie, and he is in Takahashi's section, which, funnily enough, is the Super Saiyan God section. So it is very possible that this is just him again, and all the hype may be for nothing. But only time will tell if it's actually him. I would like to point out that if it's proven to not be Nikaido in this scene, that doesn't really dispel anything right away in terms of animators and their unique touch on scenes. It could be a number of animators who have come in for this movie. It could be anyone who we're not as familiar with, at least I'm not as familiar with in terms of their effect shape, just giving their general flair onto the usual boring shapes found in original Dragon Ball. We're trying to modernize and trying to make these shapes more dynamic and interesting over time. I do think this one is the most likely, so keep that in mind as we move on to the next one, which is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where I think it's almost impossibly unlikely, but I love it so much when I thought of it that I want it to be true. And that is the Mafuba. By far my most interesting idea today, but maybe not my most solid. The Mafuba, or the Evil Containment Wave in the dub, was a technique used by Muten Roshi's master, Mutaito, to seal away the Demon King Piccolo in exchange for his own life. The technique was learned by Roshi as well, and he passed it on to Goku, who unfortunately never got the chance to use it, in the anime anyway, but he did in the manga. More recently, it was used to great effect in the Tournament of Power by Roshi himself. It may seem a bit far-fetched, but can this be a variation of that technique, designed potentially to deal damage, not actually seal? Well, first, I look to the hand positions, which are different, fair enough. The Mafuba usually just has straight arms out forward, a little bit raised to about head height, holding out, and that's how you use the technique. In this case, Goku is actually making weird hand positions. The hands are alternated in their orientation, and fingers are jutting out as opposed to the flat hands we have of the Mafuba. But other than that, the key ring that comes out of the ball does look to be an encompassing ring, and then you see Fiery Aura encompass Broly. So, instead of the Mafuba's original green color design, you have the Super Saiyan God variant of that design, potentially again made to deal damage. I'm not saying this is anywhere near confirmed or anything like that. My other guesses were way more likely than this one, and probably the artistic flair is the most likely out of all of them, but I do think it's very interesting to think about. If the Mafuba could be transitioned into a damage-dealing ability, well, would they? Is it even worth it? And that's, I think, the question I'll leave with you guys. What are your opinions on this weird Goku technique? Leave your opinions, counterpoints in the comments down below. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell if you want to be notified every single time I upload. Check out the Patreon if you really, really want to support me. But for now, guys, video outro.